Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. The Northern Super League has kicked off, which means we are shifting gears a little bit here with the content. As you might know, the last 12 or so episodes have been a collaborative series with the NSL, the Northern Super League, Canada's first ever professional women's footy league, where I brought exclusive interviews with players, sporting directors, head coaches, managers, everything that you might want to know about the league over to this channel. We covered all 6 clubs, so if certainly you're interested and you want to know a little bit more about the NSL, the clubs, and everything that is happening in Canada when it comes to women's soccer, make sure you head out to the last few episodes that I've uploaded. But as I said, we're shifting gears a little bit here. We're not talking about the NSL today, which feels a bit weird for me here, sitting in front of the camera and not talking about the NSL. We are chatting with a very, very special individual who has done a lot for women's football. After 13 years in Barcelona helping build what has become now a women's football dynasty, the most dominant club in the game, most recently being their head of management of women's football, he has taken his European skills and expertise over to the NWSL. As Boston Legacy prepares to launch as one of the expansion teams in 2026, he is now the general manager of that club. Tasked with building an expansion team without an expansion draft is none other than Domènec Guasch. Dome, it's great to have you here. How are you doing today?
It's great to be here. Thank you. I'm doing good.
How's the Boston area and the Boston weather treating you since you've moved?
Well, I have to say these last few days have gotten a lot better. So it's exciting that it feels like spring is coming. So I'm excited about that.
What have been sort of like the main differences of going over from like Europe and Spain to now the US and Boston? Something like, is there something that's standing out to you, or you're still getting acclimated to everything?
I think I'm still getting acclimated to everything. I spend a lot of hours focused on work, so actually have not had truly the time to even think outside of here. But yeah, definitely a little bit. Obviously, the weather has been a big one.
Well, let's talk about work. Obviously, let's talk about why you're in Boston. Obviously, joining Boston Nation as their first general manager. There's a lot of duties for you on the plate, putting the roster together from the sporting side to the building, the soccer responsibilities, the operations. There's a lot that is on your plate. So let's talk about work and what has you in Boston. I'd love to hear about the vision of player recruitment and sort of the process of how that is coming together and how that looks together from an NWSL perspective.
Yeah, I would say like recruitment has changed a lot now in the NWSL with the new CBA, because obviously it's a good thing now. Now players can choose where to go, and that obviously not that implies that we do not have certain expansion assets that other expansion teams had in the past, which made perhaps the job a little bit easier in the sense that obviously they had a certain ability to go and pick certain players to bring them to the team, no matter what the player thought, right?
Mm.
The good thing, hey, with the new CBA, we're now sort of working the same way that the rest of the world works in, right? And that's my background. That's our director of recruitment's background, Edward Gallagher, coming from the WSL at Brighton. So it is a little bit of the world we live in, obviously, with the complexity of having to recruit 25 or 26 players, right, instead of just a few every year to improve the team. So obviously, yeah, there's a lot of focus in that area. There's a big effort in that area, and obviously we started by understanding what we as a club want it to be right down the line and what we want to be, obviously outside of the field, but also inside of the field. And we know we want to be a protagonist team. We want to be a team that sets a tone in the game, that creates chances and make it fun for our fans, right? And obviously from that, everything else unfolds. And part of that is obviously, hey, certain player profiles, right? And then obviously certain strategies to go out and recruit them with the assets that we have, right? Which, yeah, basically is, hey, the ability of having certain allocation money and the ability to recruit through this year, right? and be able to prepare for next season that way, right? So that was the first approach that we did. Then obviously we started looking at players, especially looking more on the free agency side, right? For summertime when the windows opens in Europe, see if we can take advantage of that. And then starting to analyze, okay, what players in the US will become free agents at the end of the year, to start analyzing those, evaluating those, and seeing which ones could be interest to start talking to in the summer once they're in the last 6 months of their contracts. And then, yeah, after that, obviously, it will be about, hey, looking at what's affordable in terms of transfer too, right? We know that that we have certain conditions in this league, and obviously, as I mentioned before, we cannot just go and grab. We have to negotiate now with every single player if they have a contract. So, which again makes it a little bit more complex. At the same time, it also opens up many more players to us, right? While in the past, a lot of players would be protected or would not be achievable by us. So that is a little bit like the very generically how we are approaching it. Obviously, as we make every step, we are very mindful of at the same time being open about the process, being flexible about the process. We know we'll have to adapt, and we will perhaps not have the perfect roster. And then one very big point, and that's why we made the director of recruitment hire early, and that's why like Edward was our first recruit on the sporting side. It's that we need to provide the right environment for the players, right? And that is as important as what players we're recruiting.
Mhm.
And that's why Edward, like a highly experienced guy, is coming in, because I want him to focus on that. And yeah, obviously, I'll be here to support him. I'll be here working with him on that side. But there are many other things that are important for me, right? On the infrastructure side and on the staff side. And then to be able to provide those players that will come next year with the best environment possible so they can do their job, which is playing football, right? And they only have to worry about that. And
Mhm.
if I only worried about building the best team, then whenever that team was here in a year from now, we for sure would not be ready to perform at the highest level and to provide the best environment for them, right? So, like my focus mainly is there, right? How can we create the best environment for players here in Boston? So when all these players that we're looking into now and we're looking to bring at the end of the year, once they come here, this is home for them. This is a great environment for them and for their professional growth and for their personal growth, where they can have fun, where they can make friends, and where they can feel that they're in an extended family, basically.
Hmm. I think I take two things away from what you said in terms of that recruitment isn't looking at the next few months. It's a very long process. You're already looking ahead for the summer window and seeing what sort of players are going to be available for you, like you mentioned, from a European perspective, but also an out of European perspective. And you highlight the importance of making sure that these players have a life outside of the soccer field, because that's, I think, something that the sport continues to grow and also recognize. But I also want to highlight the coaching staff. Perhaps that's another point that we don't necessarily always think about when we're talking about building a roster, because that roster is going to include the coaching staff, which gets those players ready. What is the approach with looking at the magicians that are going to be, taking those big decisions in the locker room, and preparing the players to go out for games?
Yeah, so obviously, as you mentioned to me, that's as important. Like the roster outside of the field, right? That technical staff is as important as the roster that we put inside of the field, because they will determine the performance. They will determine the players' growth throughout the year. They will determine the players' well being as well. They will determine the how the players feel while they're with us, right? In all senses. So again, they're as important. That's why that's my focus this year, right? And that's why we brought Edward right away to focus on the players while we continue to focus on the other side. And for that, we have a recruitment company that specialized on technical stuff that's helping out. On one hand, obviously, because I'm one here, and like obviously there are a lot of people that have approached us, but we also want to be able to see, okay, who's out there, analyze data, right? And for example, for the head coach process, we've looked at a lot of data from like almost every single coach that's out there coaching at different levels, right? Here in the US and internationally. Then we've looked at the data, we've looked at how they've performed, we've looked at how they've improved their teams or not, right? And then obviously it's the part of getting to know them. And that is a sort of the approach that we're taking at every single level. Obviously, with certain people, it's harder to actually see data because either that's not available or there's no data, right, for certain positions. But on one hand, we look for, hey, people that have a similar vision than what we do on the field for what we want to build on the field, have a similar vision within their area, right? But the ultimate vision for what we want to achieve is the same, because then I know that everything gets easier, right? Everything, everybody from their lenses will be working towards the same thing. And yeah, obviously that is something that we will have to build once everybody's here. But if there's already alignment on how we see the sport, how we see the game, how we like it, then obviously once they're in, the rest gets a lot easier. So that alignment in the vision, it's one thing. The other one, the next one, I would say values, right? What are these person's values? How do they fit with the culture that we want to build? Because yeah, ultimately, like everybody talks about culture, and there are proactive things that we can do to ensure that, hey, we're building the right culture and the right foundation for this club. But ultimately, the culture will be determined by the values of the organization, and the values of the organization ultimately are the values of the people that are part of the organization, right? And alignment in those values is very important, and I feel that obviously come to mind right away. On one hand, there's the obvious competitiveness that you look for in any player or any staff member for to build a successful, but there's also the growth mindset, right? Like being ambitious in a way of like not just thinking about that score, but thinking about how can I get better today, right? And waking up every day thinking that way in a way of development. And then as a third, like to highlight, probably would be like that human first perspective, right? Like person first person. And we look into every single person coming into the organization, no matter if it's a data person or a coach or an assistant coach, for that person to be a person first person. Because ultimately we're in the person's business, we're dealing with people. And yeah, like we're all different. We all have different visions. We all have different goals. And it's very important that we all understand that, right? That we are all different, and that we, for our success, we all have to understand our differences, be able to work with them, and be able to prioritize the well-being of others at certain times where, hey, we might be thinking about that game that's so important, but that game for a certain individual might not be the number one priority that certain day because has a personal issue or something else, right? And obviously looking for the people that understands that, it is very important. And then on top of that, yeah, we'll look for the best professional within each area, right? If it's a nutritionist, obviously we want the best possible nutritionist, but with the characteristics that I mentioned before, because ultimately we're all people, we're all persons, and there are great professionals everywhere. And sometimes the hardest thing is to find a great professional that at the same time matches with the vision and matches with the values that you're looking for.
Something that I think, I mean, I love how you, first of all, bring up the fact that we are in the human business. I think sometimes in the competitive world, we forget that and we look at players as just players or staff members as just staff members. And there's a layer underneath that. And it's the fact that it's humans. And like you mentioned, it's important to put together a culture that can host growth, host success, and host, again, like you mentioned, ambition. And when I think about ambition, I think a lot about resources and sort of the infrastructure that's available to them. tell me about the process of providing that infrastructure and again, the resources that is needed heading into the inaugural season of 2026.
Yeah, so well, that is an important piece because we know that a lot of times in the women's game, the resources, not only in terms of staff members, which there's a lot of room for growth there, but also in the terms of infrastructure. But thankfully, obviously, the standards are higher and higher every single day, and obviously, our goal is to even improve them, right, and take them to a next level. And obviously now everybody knows about the stadium that we're building together with the city of Boston, where we'll be the only pro team, right? Being in that stadium, and we're aiming to create a great environment for not only our players to have fun playing and enjoy playing and be very competitive, but obviously for our fans, which is the reason why we're building all this, right? And why we're doing all this. And that is the main goal, and obviously having the fact that we can have our own stadium inside the city, and that can be a place where we can feel home, right? Because it's ours, and we're not sharing it. And a lot of times, unfortunately, in the women's game, sharing also means using someone else's, right? So it's not truly sharing when you don't have priority, right? It's like, hey, you can
Mhm.
use it at this other time, right? A lot of times. And look, I come from a world where sometimes it was like that, and it's part of it. It's part of the growth. But yeah, the fact that we're here not only building our own stadium but also our own facility, and I cannot talk much about it yet, but we will be announcing, I would say, in the coming weeks, perhaps month. There will be announcements on the training facility, which is something that we're also building our own training facility for our team, where obviously we expect it to be the true home of the team, right? A lot of people normally thinks about the stadium as the home of the team,
Mhm.
but normally on the player's perspective, on my perspective, on the staff perspective, ultimately it's the training facility, the performance center. That's the home because that's where we're going every single day, right? That's where we're going to train, where we'll spend a bunch of hours, where we'll have breakfast, where we'll share time with our teammates, where we'll have treatments with the physiotherapists and the massage therapists, where we'll be recording even some commercials, right? Where we'll be looking at video sessions and obviously where we will be training. So it's where players, again, they go in a day-to-day basis where they actually focus on, okay, how can I perform, and where they prepare for those games, right?
Mhm.
And that is where you're truly preparing to perform in those games. And that is truly what we wanted to become home for them, right? And
Mhm.
that means many different things because, as I mentioned before, every individual has different priorities, right? For certain players, might be, hey, I need top medical staff and top medical equipment for injury prevention because I've gone through experiences in the past, and I want to make sure that I can play the most amount of games possible and I can extend my career for the most amount of time possible. For another player, that will be nutrition because that she has realized how much that improves her performance, right?
Mhm.
And that will be a very important piece. And for another player, will be the state of the pitch, right, and how the grass is, and that being in perfect condition. And for another one, will be the gym, so obviously we want to take care of all those pieces. And for another one will be, hey, taking care of her child, right? Like what do I do with my child while I'm training, and what's the environment like for my child, right? So
Mhm.
there are so many different things that need to be taken into account. And obviously, on one hand, with experience and in talking to staff and bringing advisors in, we try to bring in as many different eyes to this
Mhm.
and visions to this so we can like take care of all those priorities, especially like trying to gather as much players feedback as possible too, right, in talking to players, because no one better than them know what they need, right?
Mhm.
And as I mentioned, like players are also very different. So some will prioritize something, will prioritize the others. And yeah, like those conversations have been great so far in shaping the facility that we will be announcing soon,
Mhm.
just so we can make it a home for every single one of our players and staff members.
You talk about the experience that you come in with and also the importance of resources. And it's something that you have seen across your career. And I want to highlight some of that before coming, into Boston. You spent almost 14 years at Barcelona. You took up different sporting leadership positions, including serving as head of management for women's football. That included overseeing operations, recruitment, as well as player negotiations. Tell me about your experience over in Barcelona and sort of how you, across the years, came to build a dynasty in women's football and how you are able to use your knowledge of the importance of resources and your experience over there and bring it over to the US.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that the players were the ones building that dynasty, and they're the ones that still building that. So I just did a little bit to support them as much as I could. But yeah, overall, I would say my experience in those almost 14 years in the club obviously have shaped who I am, not only as a professional, but also as a person. I'm from Barcelona, born and raised there, so obviously identify with the club and the values right away, because ultimately they're the culture's values, not they do not belong to the club. But yeah, a club with such rich culture and history obviously gave me a lot of perspective, right, on what I want to build here. While obviously this will be different, 100%, right? But there are obviously a lot of lessons that I learned through that I will use here to be able to build this. And now you made me think of like this. My last year at FC Barcelona was when the club celebrated the 125th anniversary, and we all got invited to the biggest theater in Barcelona for a celebration. And like they had someone playing the founder on stage, right? Joan Gamper. And I remember like seeing that guy, like that actor playing him, and he was talking about his vision for the club, and sort of the vision obviously was what happened afterwards, but he was talking as if he was like if that was
Hmm.
125 years before, speaking about the vision. And as I was sitting there, I was like, wow, like this was very insightful for me, in the sense that, oh, this is my last day. Obviously I had like all that emotion, and at the same time I was like, yeah, wow, now I'm gonna be part of something that I hope in 100 years from now someone is talking about, right? Still talking about. There's a lot of people that are proud. There are crowds in front of that theater because they just feel that are part of this, right?
Hmm.
And that was very insightful for me, especially like taking a look, and a lot of people will talk about 26, right? And you mentioned that before, like, oh, what roster we're thinking, but we're here for the long term. Like we're building this for the fans, we're building this for the city of Boston. We want them to be proud of what we're doing on the field. And yeah, obviously it is important how we start that, and it's very important, like obviously, to put the best team
Hmm.
in and outside of the field for 26, but at the same time think of, okay, the long term. And that's where, hey, this training facility, for example, and the stadium will play a big role. And that's why, hey, we could have fast tracked some of the things, but a lot of times, hey, we've put a hold on certain things, like, hey, let's make sure
Hmm.
more people looks at this, let's sure we get more opinions on this, and that other thing. Because again, we're not here for next year, we're here for the next 100 years, and more so, right?
Yeah.
So that long-term vision, I think the biggest thing that I take from Barcelona too,
Hmm.
in the sense that also I've been able to take advantage of the vision that a lot of people had in the past. And that's why I say, like, yeah, I'm not the one who built any dynasty or anything. I just took advantage of like what a lot of people before me had been building. I just
Hmm.
tried to support the continued growth, right? Basically, but seeing the results of that, right? Like seeing people that had invested in the youth from very early ages on the women's side, and then obviously now seeing, well, some of the players that you have in the back right there, that came out of the youth academy. This is because someone decided one day to invest in an academy for the woman, right? And now obviously, yeah, we took advantage of the results of that in the last few years, and many other decisions that were made, right? Like back in 2015 when hey decided to professionalize the team, invest a lot more, and that did not mean only like raising salaries and paying players better, which yes, it was part of it, but also
Hmm.
okay, how do we provide the right environment for the players so they can focus on just playing, right? On getting better, on having fun on the field, and performing at the best level. And again, those are like the main lessons that I take from there. And like as much as I'm obviously a lot of times caught up in the day-to-day things and looking at players and staff members and interviewing and thinking about next year and how do we perform at the highest level in a year from now, also like sometimes I try to step back and say, okay, like what are the decisions that are not going to make us only perform in 26, but are going to help us in 2030, right? And that's a lot of that environment that we're creating for the players that will not only attract the players in the short term, but will make them better in the short, medium, and long term, and will attract a lot more players and a lot more talent in the long term.
Yeah. Something that I like to do, and I like to certainly do it on the pod, is celebrating achievements in this time in the women's sports where it continues to grow. And I think we've seen that really women's sports has great potential. You just need people who push it and believe in it and like you mentioned, continue the foundations of the folks before. What would you say is your proudest memory of what you've done or a specific game or anything that comes to mind when I say a memorable moment with Barcelona?
Well, I would, and you probably could guess it. If the hint will be, it was close to the summer last year.
I think a lot of folks could probably understand that.
Yeah, so it was definitely like the fact, like when filling out Bilbao Stadium,
Hmm.
right, San Mamés with 50,000 people. I would say 45,000 of those Barcelona fans, right, being in that big stadium away from Barcelona. Yeah, like it's not that far, but I would say like for people in Barcelona, that is far,
Hmm.
and to just move that amount of people. Like I remember like that. Well, it's giving me goosebumps as I speak about it. But I remember that day, like going to the stadium in the morning and just seeing the people walking around the streets. It felt like Bilbao, felt like Barcelona. It was just a lot of people wearing Barcelona jerseys with Alexia in the back, with Aitana in the back, with Mappy in the back, with Patri in the back. That made me so proud, honestly, to be part of that group. And like that, something perhaps that if we now it sort of felt normal at the moment, while at the same time obviously we felt very proud. But if you look at it and you think like, hey, only 10 years before, right, and it's not that long ago, it would seem pretty difficult to feel like in a country like Spain for that to happen. And the fact that it did, obviously, like that's probably the proudest moment. And obviously I look forward to many more of those, because ultimately, like I think that's what like the fans are the ones that make all this make sense, right?
Hmm.
Make all the business make sense. And yeah, we ultimately we that they're the ones that we work for, right? Ultimately in putting the best players on the field so we can perform at the best, make a fun game so they're happy and engaged with the team. So yeah, that was a clear example of that
Yeah.
that one day. So yeah, that's probably the proudest moment so far.
I felt like Barcelona and Bilbao. So let's talk about cities. Let's talk about Boston. It's known for professional sports. I think there's a deep history of professional sports in Boston. Women's soccer was there for a bit. Now it's making a return. How important and special is it that the return of women's soccer is happening now in Boston?
Well, like obviously, I think as you said, like it's a city with a strong sports culture, right? Like everybody is very proud of the teams that are from here, no matter if they like or not the sport, which is something that I love, right? A lot of people will say like, "Hey, perhaps I don't like that," or they might not like soccer, but they'll still support our team, right?
Hmm.
Because yeah, it's my city's team. Now it's called my team, and I'll be there to support you. So definitely that part is big, and also adds a little bit of pressure to my work too. But I like that challenging part. I think also it helps us in terms of, hey, we were talking about recruitment before, right? And the fact that it's Boston with this strong culture. I've spoken to many players, right, that have ties to the Breakers, or supported the Breakers before, or had been to Breakers games before, and all of them remember it like as a great time, right, and
Mhm.
a great environment. And yeah, like yeah, obviously nobody is happy that it did not work out down the line. But I would say everybody that back then was supporting the Breakers is now very happy that, hey, an team is back in the city. And obviously that is a community that we're paying a lot of attention to, because obviously, yeah, they're the old and historic and true women's soccer community in Boston, right? So hey, growing around them and growing for them, it is something that we care for, and that we know, like, hey, even a few players, right, that have been here in the past, like again, like, they keep a good memory. So obviously we're tapping into them and like wanting to hear their insights on, okay, what was great about that we can continue to use, but at the same time,
Yeah.
okay, like what did not work back then, and what can we learn from that as well.
Yeah. I think the fans are excited. The community is very excited. Last question for you. What are you most excited? I know it's probably very difficult to look at that because there's so much to build and so much to go until kickoff. But when you look at that long tunnel, what are you most looking forward to?
Look, I uh, obviously there are many goals that I've set, right, for the sporting area, for myself within the club. But as of now, right, like what I'm looking to is like that first game, right? And yeah, what I look forward to is like that opening home game with a full stadium, full of fans cheering for our team, and obviously putting the best performance on the field, right? That's what I'm looking forward. Like if I have to talk about more of the short to medium term things.
Yeah, I love it. I think we all very much look forward to that first kickoff day in Boston. Hopefully, it's going to be a very big crowd there supporting. The city is going to be all on the streets. Tommy, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you, and best of luck putting a roster together and everything that comes with it.
Thank you very much for having me, and yeah, I appreciate the conversation. Enjoyed it very much. So yeah, thank you
Of
for
course.
for this.